Hey Travel Fam, it's Darian and welcome back to I Need Travel Therapy. Today we're going to be talking to Katelyn, who is an occupational therapist, and she's going to be telling us all about her experiences traveling. She has some really great stories, so I'm really excited for you guys to hear all about it. A little bit about Katelyn. She's originally from North Alabama. She received her bachelor's from Auburn University and her master's in OT from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Katelyn discovered travel therapy in pursuit of her first OT job after the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Her experience includes 3 skilled nursing assignments in Texas, South Dakota, and California. She has a passion for the outdoors, photography, and healthy living. Hey, Katelyn, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you?
I'm good. Glad we got to get together. I've been looking forward to it.
Right? I know we've gotten pushed off a little bit, but
a few delays, but all good.
Right? So just to start right into things, can you tell us a little bit about your OT background so far and where you went to school and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I went to Auburn University in kind of southern Alabama. I'm from northern Alabama, and I majored in rehab and disability studies, which ended up being kind of the ideal undergrad to go into OT school according to UAB. So went to University of Alabama at Birmingham in Birmingham, Alabama. Program was 2.5 years for the master's program. And after that, towards the end, I did my fieldwork in hand therapy in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is my setting. Let's go. No question. So I had a lot of connections in Atlanta, and it was kind of like a powerhouse for hand therapists. Like, you didn't just see like 1 or 2 hand therapists. It was like teams and like hand surgeons and the whole thing. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to set myself up. I graduated in December 2019 and moved to Atlanta while I was studying for my boards. So plan on taking my boards in March. And lo and behold, the week of my exam is when everything shut down because of COVID. I know a lot of people dealt with that. Yeah. So I was like, okay, that's fine. Everything's fine. I'm going to stay calm. So they pushed it back. Ended up being 3 or 4 times. So every time a test date was approaching, I'm like, of course, like fatigue is real. My brain is fried. I just want to take it. And they're like, okay, so we're going to push it back again. We're still not open. It's still going to be pushed back. And at that point, I was still working kind of part-time, full-time at a job I'd had for 6 years. That's part of why I moved to Atlanta, was to keep my job security while studying for boards. But they were being gracious enough to let me cut back on hours, and I just kept pushing it back and pushing it back. So eventually got to take it in in May. And I was like, at that point, it was honestly more relief than fear of the test. Because I was like, I get to take this, not like I have to take this. So it was overwhelmingly calming going into it, just knowing like I'm meant to take this today. I'm going to pass because I'm going to be an OT and I'm ready for it.
What a great way to look at that. I love that.
Yeah, honestly, it was crazy because I'm not a test taker at all. I was like really not confident, but just, I guess, leading up to it and the circumstances of what was going on, it kind of changed your perspective, I guess, for a lot of people of like, I don't have to do this. I actually get to do this. Mm-hmm. So took the exam, passed it. And coming out of it, was okay, now I'm ready. I'm in Atlanta. I'm ready to go. I'm going to apply to all these jobs. So I probably applied to like 30 plus jobs. I had like spreadsheets on spreadsheets because I couldn't even keep track of how many places I was applying. And I got this astounding no all the time because I was a new grad. And we're coming out of COVID. We're coming out of this, like the height of this pandemic. And they were like, we don't have the resources. We don't have the time or the money to train a new grad right now. You don't have any experience. And it was kind of, for me, it was a really low point because everything I had done for the past 6 years was to get to this point of being able to be an OT. And I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. I set myself up to move to Atlanta to do this, and I'm going to stick with this, but could not get a job. So after a few months, it was like late fall, I guess going into September, and I had a friend from San Francisco reach out. I was like, hey, do you want to come to California? And I'm like, well, I'm clearly doing nothing because nothing's going right. So, yeah. And I hadn't taken any kind of trips after grad school with Auburn and grad school with UAB because you just like jump into the next thing. So
Yeah.
I hadn't really even had time to celebrate any of my accomplishments because I felt like I still didn't make it to where I was going yet. So I was like, you know what? Let's go. I'm going to go. And he told me I could stay for a few weeks. I was like, you know what? Sure, let's go.
Yeah.
My mom thought I was
Yeah.
out of my mind. She's like, Katelyn, what? You're going to California for what? So I was at that point, I was just like, you know what? I'll just say yes to anything at this point.
Yeah. What time of the year was this at that point? Like, what month was it?
This was September.
So you had been looking for a job for several months at that point. You had been applying.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
probably 3 or 4 months, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, and I even used, so I guess a little backstory, I was working at an outdoor store for 6 years called Mountain High Outfitters. We're mainly over like the southeast. And through that, I was kind of in management. I was on the buying team with apparel, and I'd spent 6 years like outfitting people for the outdoors, and I was really passionate about it. But I was using those connections too to actually network while I was in Atlanta to like do, you know, what I was meant to do there, but also I was meeting doctors all the time. I was meeting, you know, really important people in Atlanta, and I'd made connections, and I'd had all these promising, you know, like resounding confidence from these people, like, hey, if you stay connected with us, like the minute we have an opening, we will hire you. Like, we really like what we see. So I had, you know, I was really confident, but that confidence only lasted so long because I still never heard back. So I went to San Francisco, had a blast, and really just like felt like myself. I was like, you know, all this stuff had happened and my perspective kind of changed of what I was doing because I've been so like I had tunnel vision like my entire career in school of like where I'm trying to get to instead of kind of enjoying what was around me.
Yeah.
So once I got to California, I was like, wow, like I'd spent so long outfitting these people to go explore, and I was like, you know, advocating for that, but I wasn't ever doing it myself.
Yeah.
So while I was out here, I had a bunch of friends reach out, and they were like, you know what, you have a spark about you. Like, you were meant to be like a traveler. Like they're just seeing like my social media and stuff, and like hearing just my change of tone and like how I was approaching things. And I had eventually a friend from grad school reach out, and she's like, hey, have you heard of travel therapy? I was like, are you out of your mind? I was like, I'm a new grad. I can't do travel therapy. I was like, because, you know, when you're in, you know, grad school and you go through your field works, normally you're put in placements where you're surrounded by teams of therapists.
Yeah.
And so, and throughout school, you're kind of taught, like, you're going to go through school and when you get out, the whole goal is to be surrounded by people and have extensive training in more like general fields and then kind of go and do your own thing. So I was like, I moved to Atlanta. I'm going to stay there. I'm going to get a job there and do hand therapy, and that's that. And she's like, okay, but I have some recruiters. You should probably just talk to them. That's all I do.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So while I was in California, I like filled out like 3 profiles, 3 different recruiters, just get an idea of what are you guys even doing? Yeah. And after talking to them, they're like, no, actually we have new grad programs. We have new grad mentors that, you know, you can be placed with based on your setting. And like, we actually promote doing it as a new grad because you get more experience, not just in different settings, but different populations. And, the adaptability and flexibility that you gain from that is like something that you're really going to excel from people who are like staying in one place.
For sure.
So I was like, okay, I hear you. Sounds promising. So I get back to Atlanta, I guess mid-September, and within 2 weeks of going back and forth with all these recruiters, I had an offer from Texas.
Yay!
I was like, wow. The first offer after all these months, it took me like 2 weeks. So I was like, okay, sounds promising. So I started to kind of like narrow down who I wanted my recruiter to be just based on conversation and just like connection that we had. And it ended up being San Angelo, Texas. Wow. And long story short, I ended up accepting that one. And that's where it all started.
That's where it all started.
Yeah.
So this idea of travel, because it seems like it was kind of out of your mind, right? You said you didn't travel a lot through grad school, and then you did this big trip to California, which kind of like sparked this excitement about it. Did you travel a lot as a kid growing up? Was that something that you had done, or was this kind of new for you? Like, had you been all over the country?
So actually, we did move a lot as I was like when I was a kid, but it was more so like I actually was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we lived in Utah when I was a kid, and then Alabama. But traveling wasn't really, it really wasn't a part of, I guess, the norm for my family. It was basically like very work focused, very, we didn't really take vacations as a kid. We didn't really, it was more seen of like outside our means, like we need to focus, like that's kind of distracting. And so growing up, like traveling just seemed like so, maybe when I was an adult, maybe, later on down the road, like that would be, more attainable.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit too? Because I feel like new grads will go into graduation and they're planning on doing travel therapy. They don't really apply to permanent jobs, so they just are looking at travel jobs. They only apply that way, or vice versa. They're only looking at permanent jobs. Since you had so much experience applying to permanent jobs and then to travel jobs, can you tell us a little bit about what the difference of that process is like? Like, is the permanent job process, obviously you were getting a lot of no's, but was it taking a while to hear back from those? Did you feel like the travel process moved faster? Like, just the difference, I guess?
Yeah, it's a big difference. So when applying to the perm jobs, for one, the application for each job, like you can even, so you submit your resume and then they still ask you to fill out all these little components of your resume. And each application takes so much. And honestly, it's like mentally draining as you're filling out all these applications. And a lot of times, you're submitting it, you don't really know who you're submitting it to and like who's really getting it. And a lot of times I never heard back. It was a lot of like calling back again, trying to figure out who I was even, are they a recruiter? Are they actually working at the facility? Like, who's this person? Whereas with travel therapy, like the great part about it is you are relying on your recruiter, but you give like all of your interests and your needs and your priorities and everything to this recruiter. And then they go out and they kind of tell you, the ins and outs. They have experience with, maybe this would be a good fit or this wouldn't be a good fit. But they can also give you like a list and you just pick from the list and you guys can go from there. But it happens so fast. Like when you submit, you have to be ready for an interview the next day. And that happened to me in Texas because, you come out of school and you're doing all these interview preps and you're like, you got your little blazer and like all this stuff you're ready for and like all these extensive questions. And they told me she was going to call like maybe within the next 2 days. They give you like a very big time frame sometimes.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So I was out running on a trail in Atlanta and I get this call and she's like, hey, so-and-so from Texas, do you have time for an interview? I was like, oh my God. I was like freaking out. I was like on the trail. So I ran back to my car. I was like, oh yeah, of course. And I'm like trying to catch my breath. And so I get back to my car and I'm like pulling out receipt papers and I'm like writing down stuff. I don't have anything prepared. So anyways, it was quite a comical experience for my first one. But that's when I realized, it happens so fast. And with her questions, I mean, these people, you have to realize that they're in need. They need someone quickly, and not a lot of people, especially like the areas that are very, isolated, they don't have a lot of applications anyways. And so when they get you and they hear your voice and they hear your passion and they hear kind of a little bit of your story, they're like, okay, let's go. When can you be here? Yeah. So when she didn't ask me how many questions. And so she was like, do you have any more questions for me? And I was like, do you have any more questions for me? I was like, shouldn't you be asking me some more stuff here? I'm ready. So that was kind of, I guess, a learning experience too, of like being prepared, but also knowing, because they will end the call quickly. So after kind of getting used to interviews, I started realizing how many more questions that I should be asking about this placement, especially when you're going in, sometimes the only therapist or a setting you're not familiar with. You should be prepared with a ton of questions. And speaking of interviews, you should also be prepared to interview your recruiter, ask them about their background and what they're, accustomed to, and kind of get to know them to make sure that when the time does come, you trust them enough to accept that job and to be with them for the next couple months.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think that's really important. I've heard that a lot where interviews can be super short. They sometimes are super long, not super long, but maybe a half an hour where you get asked a lot of situational based questions. But again, there's those times where they've seen your resume, they've seen your references, and they basically will just call and tell you about the area. And like, that's it. And so I think being empowered enough, like you said, to know like these things are important for me to know in order to move forward with this position, to feel comfortable. Because at the end of the day, like it's really important for you to feel good about being there as well, you know? And so not just them having you, but, you know, vice versa. So, because you've got to be there and do the work. So I think that's really good advice for sure. So you took your first assignment in Texas. Was there a long, like, lead up to that? Or was it like, okay, I'm starting in 2 weeks. Let's pack the car. Let's go.
So very short lead up. It was just enough time to get my Texas license. So leading up to that, I think I got the call like end of September, and my start date was November 2nd. Okay. So I had kind of a month, but really that month goes by so fast because you have to do, you know, all the background checks, you're getting your license, all like the little credential things building up to it. And then also I was living with my brother in Atlanta, and luckily I was able to just leave. And so I packed up my car, kind of narrowed down what I was going to do. I bought a rack for the top of my car. I had a crossover, and then like a cargo bag for the top. Also a game changer was those little suction bags that you can pack like linen and sweaters in. I packed way too much stuff, honestly, but I got it all there using those bags. So I recommend. But yeah, I just took my car, and my brother was super understanding. He's so happy for me. And, he let me keep, like, I basically left all my stuff, and then when our lease was over, my family moved our stuff out of that apartment, so that worked out.
Awesome. And so you had a month and you left. Did you leave like a week before the assignment started, or did you secure housing before that, or did you drive out there and look for it?
So housing was also very stressful.
Okay.
So yeah, and it's funny, it doesn't matter where you go, even if it's, now we're in California now, and it was probably harder to find somewhere here than it was out in the middle of nowhere. So that's also, you know, it's kind of deceiving. But with going to Texas, I ended up, my strategy was Airbnbs. I ended up, you know, looking for Airbnbs, but then contacting the host and saying, hey, I'm a traveler and I want to stay for this long. You know, would you give me a discount? And like, how do you set that up? And I actually got in contact with a bed and breakfast. It was a super sweet couple, Helen and Craig, and they had like this, it was like kind of like an older house that they had renovated into the top floor where they lived, and the bottom floor had all these rooms, very antique-y. They also were renovating a restaurant next door, and they immediately, like, she called me and she's like, hey, I'm willing to work out whatever. I actually have a daughter your age, and I love the fact that you're doing this. Like, you know, we'll work it out. And so they were so understanding. I was super blessed with them, and fast forward, ended up spending the holidays with them, like Thanksgiving and Christmas, their whole family. God. I even had a stocking, the whole thing.
No way.
So it just goes to show you to be so open with stuff, because I never saw myself, you know, going, you know, in college you kind of accept I may have to live with a family here, or I'm going to be flexible here. But being an adult and taking my first job somewhere, I was like, I don't want to live with someone else, basically. And but it actually turned out to be great. And when work was so rough and I was so by myself, no family, they were there to check on me and you know, make me food every now and then, and like just the little things that got me by. So, and a plus, since they were renovating that kitchen, I didn't expect to have a kitchen. I'd accepted that I was going to have a mini fridge and a microwave, and that was it. Which is hard for me because I cook every day. Yeah. Well, they actually gave me the keys to the kitchen, this restaurant, and I had this industrial kitchen that I used every day. I'm talking like counters and counters for meal prep, like huge stoves, and like this little this stove that cooks stuff and like what you would cook for like an hour and like 20 minutes, just like zaps it. It was so cool. So, and of course, like all my friends at work thought, they were like, can I come over? Can I come cook?
I'm jealous. That's like my dream, to go and like cook in a commercial kitchen like that.
Yeah, it was really cool. So I looked up with that one. But that's awesome. I did leave like 2 weeks before I started, I actually brought my best friend with me from Huntsville, and we made it into a road trip. And so we drove to Dallas in one day and stayed the night there and explored. We had another friend from Houston drive up to Dallas and meet us there and did like a whole thing. And then we ended up driving to San Angelo and we explored. She honestly made it feel like home. She's like, we're going to go here and here and here. And so by the time she left, I honestly felt like I knew the whole town. And then we went to Austin before she flew out and stayed there. So we kind of made, and it was honestly a really good transition. I never really thought about thinking about the road trips between assignments. Like maybe the city's not where you want to go, but think about that, that distance before and after. What can you see and what can you accomplish and, what can you get the most out of? So.
And like what's in the vicinity, weekend driving trips and things, I think is super important.
Absolutely. And that was the other thing was when I took this Texas job, one of my priorities was I heard that this specific facility had, bigger branches in those bigger cities like Dallas and Austin. And so I was like, okay, my goal, I'm going to go to this town. Hopefully it goes well. And if I have a good connection, they like me, my goal is to get transferred to one of these cities. But I had never even been to Dallas or Austin. Yeah. So with her coming with me, I was like, I can at least get a taste of these places and then hopefully transition. So that was a big learning curve for me too, is like, it may not be where you want, but like, how can you make this a strategy, for your future or for the current assignment to get the most out of it?
That's so smart to look at it like that, because there are quite a few like rehab clients that are big clients that will have facilities all over the place. And it happens all the time where you create this good connection, like you said, and then they would love to have you come back. So you do have more flexibility with the location, because now you're not, just a brand new grad. You have experience with their systems, their, documentation system, the way they like to work and all of that. So it does make it easier to get those other positions. That's awesome.
Exactly. And I had a area director tell me that she actually really, I guess I'll get into that later, but I ended up traveling with Caesar as a PTA. And she told us that she's like, we don't really like you guys to have to start over. Like, we don't like starting over every 3 months, just like you don't like starting over every 3 months. She's like, we have to train people, you're travelers. We have to train you guys every 3 months. You guys have to learn the system. We have to do this over and over again too. So if we can get a good connection with you, you may go out here in the middle of nowhere, but I have clients over here on the West Coast where you're trying to get, and we can get you there. Yeah. So it's always something to think about.
Yeah. So speaking of your first facility, you said it was in San Angelo. Is that a big town, small town? What was it like getting started there?
No, it's super small. It's also hours from like the next big city would be, if you were going to San Antonio or Austin or Dallas. So it's basically you're either taking a weekend trip there or you're staying put. And
when you say small, like how small are we talking? How many people live there?
Oh gosh, I honestly don't know the population. Definitely a couple thousand.
Okay, so pretty small.
Up not being the smallest town that I worked in, so it got smaller from there. I tried to get bigger and it went smaller. But it's definitely your small town feel, but even like the culture was different. I mean, I was used to Southern Alabama. Like, I'm used to the country. I mean, my family's very Southern and my dad's from the West. Like, I was used to that culture, but like Texans were totally different, and I definitely stood out. And through that, I guess we sometimes we grow up and we live in these bubbles of like who we're friends with and like the type of people we hang out with and the culture we're used to, and we kind of cling to that. With travel therapy, you kind of learn to just like say yes to whoever's asking you to go do stuff. You're saying, you're exploring more on your own, but you're also kind of, you're immersed in the environment. But since you're living there for a few months, you kind of want to be a local. And it's kind of like a quick transition between like, I'm visiting to I'm living here temporarily. They did have a really good gym, so that was covered. Grocery stores were great. It actually ended up being a lot better than I expected.
Oh, good. Okay. So you like the town. That's good.
Yeah. I wouldn't go back, but...
we said she liked it. She didn't love it.
Yeah, exactly. We'll keep it at that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The people were so sweet, though.
Oh, that's so nice. Especially, I mean, the place that you were staying, they sound great there too. And that makes such a huge difference. So
they're amazing. And then, what I ended up towards the end of it, my last month, I'm into photography and I've been trying to figure out how to get that off the ground. And they had a social media and I kind of gave them some tips on like, hey, I noticed your Airbnb, your pictures aren't actually what it looks like. And I had started taking pictures around the place and she loved it. So my last month, she actually cut some off of my rent to help her with her website and to redo her pictures. So that was also like a fun little side project too. Yeah. And that led to a speech pathologist at work. She had friends in a biker club and never thought I'd see myself at this biker club, but they asked me to take pictures for an event. And so here I am, all these leather boots, chains, whole thing. And I'm just running around taking pictures of all these bikers. My friends were like, fun. Katelyn, what are you doing?
I would love to do something like that. That sounds so fun. Those are crazy too. Those biker festivals and rallies and stuff, they get wild. I was like, okay guys, I gotta go to bed. Y'all, I gotta go home. But it was fun. It was definitely out of my norm, but that's just kind of where everything started of like, you know what, I'm gonna have a blast no matter who I'm with or what I'm doing. And I grew a lot from there, so. Yeah. Okay, cool. And so can you tell us a little bit about your first experience at your first facility and what that was like, especially with COVID going on? And at this point it's November, right? So so COVID had been going on for a while at that point. Okay.
It had been. And so coming into it, I knew I was going to be during the interview. I didn't know this before the interview, but during the interview, she was asking me if I was comfortable with supervising codas. And I was like, I hadn't really thought about it. And this is my first job, so it's kind of a lot. But if I have like someone I can lean on there, like how many OTs do you have on staff? I'm sure I could work with them. And she was like, oh, you're going to be the only OT. And that's when I was like,
perfect.
Oh, okay. And then she said, are you okay with that? And I was like, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
And she's like, no, she's like, I'm an OT. I'm here. Like, I'm not really in the buildings, but when you get there, like, you'll be trained and it'll be okay. And then she mentioned you are going to be at one building, but you're going to be doing telehealth at the other two buildings because you can't cross-contaminate. So you can't go to the other ones. And she's like, but all it is really supervising the other codas. Okay. I was like, okay. That sounds, if I'm trainable, if you guys train me and if I feel comfortable, and that's fine. Well, I got there and it wasn't the case. I showed up day one and was handed the laptop, and the rehab director didn't have clinical background, so he could show me kind of some ins and outs of the actual program. But as far as like actually the difference between an eval and a recertification and a progress note and the discharge, I hadn't been in skilled nursing at all, no field work or anything. So I wasn't used to some of these like terms and specific documentations or the type of billing that they were doing. So I was kind of overwhelmed immediately, and I was trying to wrap my head around, the patients I had to see at that building. And then he said, so you're actually also going to supervise a coda at another building via telehealth. She's going to call you on the phone. You guys are going to FaceTime. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do? And he was like, you just watch what she's doing. That's all. You're just supervising. I was like, okay, I can do that. And then she starts texting me. The coda's like, hey, when you want to get together. And I was like, I don't even know how to work this computer. I don't even know how to turn it on. So then the DOR at the building next door messages me. It was like, hey, you have 5 patients at my building. And I was like, what? Okay, well, who's the coda over there? And then she called me. I hadn't even started anything yet. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. And then they tell me that I'm going to have to walk outside and treat these patients outside their bedroom window. And I was like, hold on. I'm sorry. I think I misunderstood what you just said.
Yeah.
This is a joke. And he said, no, you're going to find the coda. You guys have to like FaceTime and coordinate. She's going to be on the inside, and then you're going to look through the window and you're going to facilitate what's happening. And she's going to physically facilitate it, but you're going to guide her and tell her what to do. And I even had like evals that day. And I was like, I'm sorry. But I'm trying to stay calm. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just like not, handling this the way that I should, but I'm trying to stay calm. So I saw my patients for that day, and then I saw the FaceTime with Dakota first, and towards the end of the call, she was like, okay, so all these people we saw today, you have progress notes due on all of them. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? I thought I was just watching you. And she's like, no, you have to write the progress notes for my patients. And so, anyways, I'm like, I'll figure that out, I guess. So then I move on to the next building, and we literally FaceTime, and she's like, okay, I'm on, B Hall, room 32. Can you go outside and find that window? And I'm like, what are you talking about? So we ended up coordinating. She was actually like so helpful, and she knew this was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So we were trying to work together. She's like telling me, go left, go right, go outside the building. And then, of course, the patients, they're really understanding, but at the same time, they're like, there's someone outside my window. And they're like, some of them were scared. Like, why is this person staring at me? And then my first week, actually had nurses come outside and say that people on the inside were reporting that a homeless person was creeping outside their window.
No way.
And I'm standing there. I have my laptop. Okay, you want to talk about productivity? They're wanting me to document outside in the bushes while I'm facilitating this. And I'm just like, this is unbelievable. Like, my papers are flying everywhere. I'm like, well, there goes HIPAA. Like, here goes my sheet. So I'm like,
I cannot believe that. That is like mind blowing to me that people were saying there was a homeless person.
Yeah.
You're like, nope, I'm just the new therapist.
I'm like standing here in scrubs with my laptop and my papers, like trying to facilitate this. I'm like, are y'all serious right now? So anyways, it ended up being, several of my patients that got used to it. Like, I had this one sweet old lady, who, have you seen Hunger Games?
Yeah.
Okay, so Katniss?
Yeah.
She's like climbing around doing crazy stuff.
Yeah.
She's like, is that Katniss out there today? She started calling me. So then my nickname for everyone was Katniss. And they're like, what kind of bush are you going to jump over today? Because I'm like literally like on the ground. Some of their windows are like low. So I'm like literally like on the ground with my laptop. Like, all
was
right.
this all day, every day? Was this like what you did? Or did you get to interact with patients, face to face at all?
So my only face-to-face patients were in my building.
Okay.
And the other ones were the telehealth, which honestly, the service was so bad. They couldn't really see me. I couldn't really see them, what was going on. I had to really depend on my codas. And in the beginning, like, luckily they've been doing this for a while. So I seriously depended on them and like just trusted, like, I trust you guys, have what's going on. Like, you guys have this together. But there's so many times where they have to dress up in all the PPE and they go into the room and we get halfway through. And then I'm like, oh, wait, if I would have been there, I would have grabbed this and this and this. And this is kind of because I still have to control what's going on.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, now we need a ruler. We need this weight. We need all this stuff. And so now they're stressed. They're already dressed up. And it just always was such, like chaos, honestly. And then we lose service. Our phones would, the girl on the inside, the phone would either shut off or go on mute, or the patient couldn't hear us and we're like repeating what we're saying a million times. And they're just like, I felt so bad because I was like, they're not benefiting here. Like, I want to be in there. I want to be with them. And just the whole COVID, it really changes, not just, you watch also with the families having to visit through the window. They can't go inside. Seeing the impact that has, and there's no, family education during my first assignment didn't exist because my patients weren't seeing their families. And a lot of these in long-term care, they weren't ever going home. They were here. And so the learning curve, when I got out of that and I started going to facilities that they did have their family visit, now I was like, wait, I don't even know how to educate their family because I didn't have to do that. I never even saw their family. But then being able to work one-on-one with the family and like showing them, this is the interventions we've been doing. Here's the progress. Now this is how you take this home, and having them teach it back. And that whole experience, it was mind-blowing, the difference that it made. Not just that, but even, the patient having their family there to support them and to encourage them throughout the whole thing. Like, rather than just them staying in their room all day. It's honestly heartbreaking. And then you get into the components of physical touch and, spending more time with people. Whereas we're trying to be like in and out. all of it was just very complicated. And as a new grad coming in, and that being my first exposure to what a job is like, it's like, this is not really what I went to school for. This is not really what I was prepared for. But it kind of teaches you the importance, too, of what you're doing and the importance of, like, your own body language and your facial expressions and, like, the genuine compassion that you can verbalize to them because they're not getting it from anyone else.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
and maybe some of the only interactions they're getting throughout the day or that day is with you. And so making that a positive interaction or as positive as possible was like, you can probably really tell at that point, like you are making such a difference as a therapist, even if it's different than what you thought it was going to look like. If it's just on like a human level of like making that connection, like you said.
Yeah. And that's also where, coming in as a new grad, my skill set, as far as like clinical knowledge, like I don't have that much experience, but just knowing like at the end of the day, like that's the importance is that they're getting, that they're progressing, but they're also, getting the positive feedback and the confirmation and validation that they need. And even just the human interaction, like I didn't just go in with like a therapy, like this is therapy. This is like, me trying to get to know this person or me spending time with this person because it may be the only interaction that they get besides nurses coming in and out. And so making the sessions about them, which was what we learned in therapy school, like, in OT school, it was very big on patient focus, but like now more than ever was it important to make it, what are their interests? What decisions can they make in this small session to, give them the confidence that they have control over something.
That's huge. Yeah. Okay. So you have this experience, which sounds crazy, your first experience outside of school. So you are working on that assignment. Did you consider extending, or when did you start kind of looking for your next assignment, and where did you end up next?
So, no, I didn't plan on extending.
Okay.
It was just a lot. And I heard from other people, actually I was talking to other recruiters and telling them what was happening. And they were like, Katelyn, never in my history of recruiting have I ever heard any of the stories you're telling me.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is a sign. I probably need to, move on. So I actually met my now boyfriend at that facility. He's a PTA, and he had traveled from Florida to Texas for his first assignment, ended up becoming DOR there. He had always wanted to do travel therapy, but with the promotion and he had bought a house to flip, he changed his priorities to stay there. So towards the end of it, now I had this, I was just getting used to traveling by myself, and I was just adjusting to, my career and wrapping my head around how long I wanted to travel and where I wanted to go. But I don't know, we just had a really strong connection, and I felt confident that if we did travel together, that we'd be successful. So we were like, okay, let's do this. So we were planning on going to the West Coast. Of course, when you think of travel therapy, everyone's like West Coast, like California, and they that's a lot of people, their priority. And we were trying to get there. This whole time I was trying to get to Seattle. As a couple trying to find assignments, it was a lot more difficult. You kind of have to prioritize, okay, you kind of have to let go. I was getting some really cool assignments, and then he was getting some really cool ones, but we weren't getting them together. Yeah. But we had to decide, make the sacrifice for each other. Like, I'm not going to go without you. You're not going to go without me. So we're not going to settle, but we're going to figure out a strategy that works. So, we're still trying to get to the West Coast, and also licenses take way longer than you'll ever expect, so always apply early. And so our strategy was going to be, since he's a PTA, jobs are harder for him to get. There's less of them right now. So we're going to find his first and then find mine, or find them together. Well, as we're looking, our recruiters reached out, and they were like, hey, we have this assignment that they'll take both of you guys in South Dakota. Yeah. And we were both like, South Dakota. We were like, no, absolutely not. But we're getting kind of desperate because we had a lot of there's only one of us getting a job somewhere. And so we kind of, then we strategized, okay, we'll at least take an interview. Well, we take the interview with the guy, and he was like, he doesn't even live in South Dakota. He lives in a a fairly big city, and he's wanting us to go out in the middle of nowhere. It was like a bunch of buildings that this company had just bought. And he was like, yeah, I have no idea what's out there. I was like, great. And he was asking me to travel between like an hour between these 3 buildings. And after my first assignment, I learned again to advocate for myself and what I needed and what my patients need and what I want to focus on. And one being, I don't want to be split between buildings. I need to focus on, a solid caseload, getting a routine, and being successful at that before I'm like managing all these other things. So I turned it down, and I was like, we're not interested. I'm not going in the middle of nowhere. The population was 1,200. And I was like, no, yeah, perfect, great. And so, of course, like, we want to go, we want to travel and see the world and have fun like any other traveler. So that was still kind of our priority. So then we told our recruiters no. Well, then our recruiters reached out to them, and originally we were actually going to be at like 2 neighboring buildings, and we both said no to that. When they rearranged the contract to say, okay, you're both going to be at the same building, Katelyn's not going to travel, we're going to put it in there, she's not going to travel at all, and we're going to give you a completion bonus. So we're like, okay, we'll think about it. So then at this point, they had only talked to me. They hadn't even really talked to Caesar. So then they call him, and I like have like way more questions written out. So then I'm like handing them paper the whole time, like telling them to ask all these questions. And finally, they worked out a better deal for us. And so like, okay, we'll think about it. So then we took a step back and we're like, okay, let's think about big picture, what our goals are. Going out in the middle of nowhere is not ideal for anyone, but me getting started, him getting kind of started again, if we were just to go to West Coast and be, for one, probably busy every weekend, you want to see the sights, you want to take advantage of the time, also occupied with our normal gym and like all the resources that we wanted, kind of filling our lives with what we were used to, but also like, where's the opportunity to save money in that when as a new grad traveling, you're not guaranteed a job every 3 months. And so starting out, it's honestly, the more I talk to more people, it's smarter to go to those smaller cities first, have, your housing is going to be less, the cost of living is less. You're probably going to get paid more because you're the only one going in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And you're not distracted by all these things that could pull you in multiple directions, financially, mentally, physically. And so we're like, okay, if we go out there, we're going to have ample time to be able to research the way we want to do the CEUs we need to do, to really, also familiarize ourselves with like travel therapy and the ins and outs of things, and kind of figure out a better plan. And then we'd be in a better place once we went to those bigger cities to where we could relax and have more fun because we put in the work first and we took like a smaller sacrifice first. Yeah. So that's what we did. And it ended up being quite an experience, but at the end of it ended up being, honestly, for some reasons, one of my favorite assignments. So,
really? Okay. Well, it was your first one together, too, which is kind of fun.
Yes,
like you guys traveling together.
We were the only therapists. So he was the DOR and the PTA, and then I was the OT. Wow. So I didn't even have quotas at that point. So I had gone from wanting more OTs to not even getting quotas. But like us also early in our relationship, we were kind of nervous about working together and traveling together and the whole thing. But it ended up, honestly, every single day I felt so comfortable. And then knowing that, I had someone that I trusted on my team, we actually ended up working with our patients so well because we knew each other. We knew how each other worked. Our patients ended up developing relationships strongly with both of us. And we were able to kind of, communicate daily and communicate flawlessly because we were so familiar with each other. Yeah. And then it ended up being, honestly, a really good experience overall.
Good. I love that. Okay, good. So you're in South Dakota. Was the drive there pretty normal? Everything was good, or was
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So, it was hard for us to accept this job to begin with. But one of our justifications among those others that I listed was I have family in Albuquerque, and he has friends in Colorado.
Okay.
So we're looking at this route, and we're like, okay, we can make the most out of this because on our way through, I haven't seen my grandpa in forever or my other family. So we're going to go through there. We're going to stop and see them. Then we're going to go to Colorado and then get there. So that alone would be immensely worth it for us to drive up there. Well, nothing goes according to plan ever, apparently. So we getting ready to leave, we had kind of mapped that whole out. We were going to leave with enough time to get there with our start date. And a few days before, we had already reserved the U-Haul. We had everything packed up. He was also leaving his entire house that he was in the middle of flipping. It was still partially, he had one more room left to renovate, but he was depending on his contractors to finish it up while we left. So, like 2 days before wrapping everything up, and we get contacted by the board, because our licenses actually hadn't even gone through yet, that they wanted to send him a fingerprint packet in the mail, and that we couldn't leave until we picked that up and sent it back. So contact our recruiters, and we were like, this doesn't work. Like, we have to be on the road for us to get there to start. And they were like, you know what, we'll work it out. So they contacted someone and said, okay, we understand you guys can't, this is out of your control, and you guys are doing what you're told, so we're going to extend your start date back by a week. And we're like, okay, that sounds reasonable, so we're comfortable. Well, then, like, the next day we start, listening to the news, start hearing that there's a winter storm coming through and that there's going to be snow. And the temp, starts dropping into the teens, and we're like, well, this is kind of unusual for Texas, but Texas did have some random snows. Like, while I was there, we had, the second day I was there in fall, we had, a random snow, and then it went away. So we were like, okay, it seems like normal. We're just going to be prepared.
Yeah.
So we stayed in contact with everyone. And then leading up to it, we find out that the storm is so bad coming in Tennessee that his fingerprints get stuck on a plane that can't fly in the conditions. So we're like, okay, so now we're delayed. So then we start waiting again, and now the storm starts actually coming in, and it's actually serious. And we're getting a foot of snow. Texas isn't prepared. The roads aren't prepared to, no one's clearing them. We start watching the news, Austin, Dallas, there's 50 car pileups, ice everywhere. No one can control anything. And with us being in the town we had a lot of small random roads we were going to have to take to even get out of Texas.
Yeah.
So then we're like, okay, this is serious. We need to actually look into this some more. So we start watching it. Temp starts dropping again. We're getting down into 10 degrees, lower and lower. The lowest temps that Texas had seen, and also the most ice and snow Texas had seen in a long time. So then we reach out to my family in New Mexico who's used to this, and they're like, no, we're getting more snow than we've had in a long time, and you actually should not come up here at all. You actually should stay put until this whole thing blows over.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, great. So then we're like, you know what, this is okay because our start date was pushed back, so we're going to be fine. Well, then they reach out and they're like, hey, so actually forget the fingerprints. We're going to keep your start date the way that it is, and we'll just figure it out. And this is days before we're supposed to start. This is on a Friday, and we're starting on that Monday, and we already planned a week trip to get there. Or maybe not a week, but 4 days. So we were like, no, this doesn't work. We can't do that. And so we started going back and forth, and we're getting a lot of pressure from our recruiters that are saying, if you guys don't get there on time, they will end this contract. And we were already kind of in a rush to get started, so we were honestly so stressed. We had pushed back the U-Haul days so many days trying to figure out what we were going to do. Well, as things get worse, we start getting worried about the house. And, the house isn't completely renovated. The insulation is not complete. So we had exposed flooring. The heat actually couldn't heat up the house anymore. So because of the exposed flooring. So now we're carrying around buddy heaters, around the house to even to the bathroom to cook, all this stuff. But we were running the pipes all day, so the house was loud. Trying to manage the stress, but all this stuff happening. And then as we were going, instead of planning in advance a few days, we were actually going half a day by half a day. Should we leave today? Should we leave now? Should we? And we're just packed, just waiting. When's the right time? And we're continually getting reports from all of this dangerous situations. And then they start doing the power shutdowns. So they're doing rolling blackouts throughout the city. And during that same time, we finally decide on a day to leave because we actually realized that it was getting to the point. Honestly, the house was so cold and the water, like all the pipes were freezing, things were shutting down, power shutting down. The grocery stores, they couldn't get the supplies that they needed because the supply trucks couldn't get into these smaller towns.
Yeah.
So we actually realized that it was getting to the point that it was more dangerous for us to stay where we were than to even just maybe get out of Texas.
Yeah.
So like, okay, we actually should just get out because things just keep getting worse and worse. Mm-hmm. So the day we're supposed to leave, our pipes froze. We couldn't do our last load of laundry. We couldn't take showers. I go to a friend's place to shower. We have the U-Haul packed. We're like trying to go, and her power's out. So then we lit the candles. I take a shower. Then I go to get in the truck. At this point, we're exhausted. We're fatigued. We're dehydrated. So stressed about to conquer this road trip. We're like, it's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
So as we get on the road, things just continue to turn to like unexpected event after one another. The going out of Texas, they started doing like statewide shutdowns, and so many people were losing power that everyone was staying in hotels. So we had planned to drive through the night and stay in a hotel that next day, and we had booked it. There's all these ones like we're full. Then on the way, gas stations were closed. We literally couldn't find bathrooms. Like we were going into random grocery stores, their bathrooms were closed because all the supply, like the pipes were frozen, but the water supply was short.
Wow.
And so we're actually like, what is even happening, or what are we even doing? So we ended up driving through the night, getting to a hotel. We're like, oh my gosh, it's 5 a.m. We're going to sleep, then get back on the road. And they're like, hey, sorry, there's a mistake. We're full. I don't know who told you had a room, but we're full. And we were at that point honestly scared because then we're facing like, okay, it's dangerous to drive because we're so tired.
Yeah.
But then also there's nowhere to stay. And now we're in the negatives. So we're in like negative 10 degrees weather. And we're like, okay, it's too cold to sleep in the truck. There's like ice all along the outside of the truck. Every time we open it, we're like breaking off ice because we're the only ones on the road, basically.
Oh my gosh.
So, we ended up driving. We were like just, kind of stopping and taking like short naps. And we ended up driving until we drove to Oklahoma City and ended up, we got there. We drove like overnight another day. I don't even remember at this point. I just know it was over 30 hours of us being awake. We found a hotel. We took a nap during the day at the room, and then we had like another 7 hours. And every segment we were preparing. So let's say you expect 4 hours to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Because of the roads and us pulling a U-Haul, we were going about 30 to 35 miles per hour. So we expected to take us 4 hours would actually take us 8 or 9 hours to get there. So this whole trip is just getting longer and longer and longer. And we ended up taking that nap in the hotel, and this snow in Oklahoma started to settle down. The roads were clearing out. We're like, okay, we're good. So we packed up, left the hotel, and then we turned on the radio, and of course, there's another blizzard coming through Oklahoma. And we stopped to eat, and the restaurants were all closing early. And we asked the locals, like, you guys are used to this, right? It's just Texas. And they're like, no, this is not normal for us.
Yeah,
these blizzards, this amount of snow. They're like, everyone's like running home, and we're like, what are we doing? So at this point, we're like, well, are we still going to go? Like, yes, we're going to go. We're absolutely going to go. Well, then our regional reached out to us and called us just to check in, and we told her what was going on. And we had gotten in contact with her by chance, because normally, I guess, backstory, you don't really have contact with the regionals really until you get there.
Yeah.
It's really more of like the recruiters and the contacts that work it out for you. But because Caesar was going to be the director, she needed his contact and needed to work out some plans with him. Mm-hmm. And so we told her what was going on, and she was like, are you kidding me? Why are you guys even on the road? And we're like, we thought we were going to lose our job. And she was like, You're risking your life for this job that's not going anywhere. We need you guys, and we need you guys in one piece. So she was like, go back to the hotel. She's like, anyone watching the news would know what you guys are going through. So go back to the hotel. You guys stay another night and wait it out. If it's safe, then leave, and just keep me updated. That's it's fine. And that was just
so nice.
Oh my gosh, it was the biggest relief. So we were like, okay, we're good. So we stayed again. And we kind of did the same thing. We ended up driving through the night again to get to our next place, Omaha, Nebraska. And then that was kind of, we were starting to chill out a little bit. We were kind of taking our time, resting and everything. And then when we ended up getting close to Britain, somehow we always ended up in the middle of the night. So now it's like 2 a.m. We're a few hours away. The roads start getting smaller and smaller, and it's still like icy and snowy. Well, then the temperature is down into like -14. We're getting, and the more we get into South Dakota, this like the negatives are just like numbers I've never even seen. I was like, oh, okay, this is fine.
Yeah.
No big deal. Don't panic. You should have seen what I was wearing. I think I was wearing like 4 jackets, this huge white jacket, and like the hood. I have like a scarf and a beanie and gloves. I'm like walking around like this.
Oh my God.
So we got there in the middle of the night, and we're like, okay, we're finally here. Well, the instructions, first of all, this house, we found it on Airbnb, and it was this house on a prairie, and all the pictures are summertime. There's horses and grass and like these white fences, like the whole thing. It's so perfect. This giant house. Well, coming in the middle of the night, you couldn't find the house, like, you know, on maps. You had to literally follow like her, like, turn on County Road 5 and then left and right here. So like, okay, Red Barn. It's like, 3 a.m. We're like so tired. We're trying to figure this out. We end up like deep snow in someone else's yard at 3 a.m. And so we're like spinning donuts trying to get out of this thing. Like our U-Haul's probably like running over their flowers or whatever. Like, great. So then we end up finding our driveway, and it's this long driveway, and then it's kind of up on a hill, so you see nothing in the background, and it's this white, like, antique, old-looking house, like what you see on a movie, like your worst nightmare, basically, like a horror movie.
Oh,
so
perfect.
Perfect. What else could go wrong? So then we end up pulling down this driveway. You can't even see it because of the snow, and then we get in there, and I'll spare you, but it was actually like legit scary, like going into this. I'm normally not scared at all, but it actually was a very creepy house, 3 floors. And we couldn't even care. We like looked around. We're like, yeah, this is actually really scary. We'll see what it looks like tomorrow. So we found a bed and we passed out. We had about maybe 3 hours of sleep because we got there the morning before we told them we would come to work. So now this is Friday. And we were supposed to start Monday.
Okay.
So we were like, they said, just come in. It's not like no pressure. It's going to be a really relaxed first day. I just need, you guys can just come in and at least meet the staff and stuff. Okay. But okay. So we woke up and lo and behold, the pipes are frozen. So we've been on the road for a week. We were so tired. And the pipes are frozen, so we couldn't, like, make coffee. We couldn't take a shower. This is, your first day. You're supposed to be well-rested and showered and all this stuff. No. So I ended up getting a water bottle, and I'm, like, washing my face. I'm like, nothing, at this point, nothing fazed me, to be honest. Just, like, whatever. So then we end up going to go to work, and the U-Haul is frozen onto the truck. So we couldn't detach it to go to work. So here we are. It's not our first day. We're not new in this tiny town of 1,200. We're pulling this U-Haul down the road past Main Street. And then we pull into work with a U-Haul in this tiny parking lot. So, everyone's looking out the window. They're new.
You're just waving.
Hey, guys. We're the new people.
Oh my gosh.
So what's so funny is the day we walked in, the MDS coordinator was dying at the fact that we had just pulled this U-Haul through town, because she was like, you realize that one person probably saw you at the post office, which means the lady that works at Dollar General knows you're here, which means the guy at the lumber shop knows you're here, and like it was just this big circle. And she was like, by the end of like next week, they're going to know your names. And we were laughing and we thought she was just kidding, but she was not kidding. Throughout this assignment, seriously, we would go to places like the lumber store to get something. And the guy was like, so I heard, he said something about like, how was that storm in Texas? And we were like, I was like, Sandra, do you know him? He was like, no, do you know him? I was like, no. So they seriously knew we were the
But they knew
travelers.
you.
We were the travel therapists from Texas for this entire time. And then he ended up, he probably is going to be embarrassed that I say this, but he ended up going to a flower shop to get rose petals because he was doing this dinner thing one night. And the lady of course, you go in there not thinking anyone's going to know you.
Yeah.
And the lady knew who he was. And she was like, oh yeah, my brother is the one who owns the lumber shop. And he knew that you guys were together. And she was like, is this for her? Are these roses for her?
No way.
He was so red, and there's like all these families in there that are probably honestly related to our patients. And he was just like, oh my gosh. He was like, Katelyn, you won't believe what I went through to get these roses. So,
oh my gosh.
It was it was honestly hilarious.
Okay, so you've done all of this stuff. Now you've been in Texas, you're rural South Dakota, and I think we know which way that's going, which I bet it was actually really fun, but it was definitely a different vibe, right? Like, everybody knows everybody, which is a lot different from, like, I don't know, where you went to school and everything, right? Would you say overall that, like, travel has been a good experience for you? Like, are you glad that you're traveling? You're glad that you're doing it, that you guys are doing it together?
Honestly, yes.
Yeah.
It's been... I don't know. It's just been something that I never thought that I could do because, in school I was so focused on, like I said, getting to the next step. I also had a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and I was so comfortable in my environment that even if I took weekend trip to go home to see my mom, I wanted to get back to my norm, my normal. And this has kind of taught me so much more about myself and being open to new things and being flexible and adaptive, and also, the things that I was clinging to, the securities, of your normal resources of your gym and your grocery stores and, the type of things that you eat and do and your activities. And also thinking, every weekend I need to go do something or I need this new thing or anything like that. With travel, part of it is, you're going to move in a few months. And so you're not really wanting to collect anything and you're not wanting to, get more bogged down in certain things. But it also teaches you to be more resourceful. So in South Dakota, there was not a grocery store. There was the tiny little corner market, but we're used to organic stores. We're used to meal prepping all of our food every week. And so we kind of had to prioritize being healthy and, being active is important to us. So every weekend we would drive an hour and a half to the nearest grocery store, which ended up being Walmart, and we got our produce from there. We would have to be sure to do our online pickup beforehand because they also honestly don't have a lot of resources. So if you went to grocery shop on Saturday, there wouldn't be anything left. They would actually run out of stuff like every Saturday. So we would do the order beforehand and then go get the groceries. We would also, that was our only time to go to a gym. We went to the YMCA every Saturday. And then other times it was home workouts, spending all day Sunday meal prepping. There was really nowhere to eat out anyways. So kind of changing that mindset of all those things that I was tied to and realizing that I spent all that time and how freeing it was honestly changed me as a person. And it showed me okay, what was why did I think I had to have all those things before? Yeah. But then the experiences that you get and the populations and kind of, you're not just learning from different settings. So I have been in skilled nursing for 3 assignments, but from Texas to South Dakota to now California, very drastic. Everyone was so different. So the speed was different. The population's different. The insurance, variance is different. All of it is. And so even if you can't get the diversification of different settings, you're still, you're still opening yourself up to so many different experiences. And now as we look for other jobs in other settings, I'm actually interested in acute now. And looking into acute, I've talked to some directors that were like, I know you don't have acute experience, but the fact that you've done what you have in this short amount of time, that you've seen, same setting, but so many different places shows that you're able to adapt and you're flexible and you have to be quick. You have to be a quick learner to be a traveler. So being with all of that, I can just build to have a lot more confidence with myself and what I'm capable of and what I'm open to.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I feel like I could listen to your stories all day. You've got like so many good ones. I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. I really appreciate it. And going through like your kind of whole experience is just such an interesting story that we wanted to make sure to like kind of talk about everything. And I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thanks for tuning in to I Need Travel Therapy. To learn more about today's episode, make sure to explore the show notes at medtravelers.com/I Need Travel Therapy. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a guest. If you're a therapist interested in traveling, visit medtravelers.com to explore nationwide travel therapy job offerings and to learn about the amazing benefits that MedTravelers has to offer. Also, a very special thanks to producer Jonathan Carey, assistant producers Katie Schraben and Sam McKay, and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. See you next time, Travel Fam.